My siblings excluded me from every family event, so I became the one they needed most. Hey everyone, I've been lurking here for a while, scrolling through stories and feeling a little less alone. But today I finally feel ready to share something really personal that's been weighing on me for years. I come from a family with 3 siblings, and honestly, I've always felt like the invisible one. It didn't happen overnight. It started with small things, like not being invited to hang out after school or being left off group texts. At first, I thought maybe it was accidental or just normal sibling dynamics. But as time went on, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Birthdays, holidays, family dinners, celebrations, any occasion where families usually come together. For me, those moments were often empty or took place without me. I'd find out about parties or trips through a friend or social media long after they happened. It felt like I was deliberately excluded, and that realization cut deep. My siblings were close, sharing inside jokes and memories, while I was stuck on the outside, craving even a small space in their lives. It hurt more than I ever wanted to admit. I tried to tell myself it was normal sibling rivalry or maybe just a phase. But the truth is, it made me question my place in the family, my worth, and whether I truly belonged. The exclusion wasn't just about missing parties or events. It was the constant feeling of being invisible, even when we were all under the same roof. I remember so many family dinners where I'd sit quietly at the table while my siblings talked over each other, sharing stories, laughing, making plans, none of which ever included me. It was like I was a ghost in the room. Sometimes, they'd make plans for the weekend right in front of me, assuming I wouldn't ask to join because, well, I probably wouldn't be invited anyway. The worst part was the holidays. Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays. All the times when families are supposed to come together felt like reminders of how alone I really was. I'd see photos later of them hugging, smiling, and celebrating, moments I was left out of. The loneliness was crushing. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? Why don't they want me around? It wasn't just physical exclusion, it was emotional isolation that cut the deepest. Over time, that hurt built up, shaping how I saw myself and my family. The exclusion wasn't just about missing parties or family events. It was the crushing feeling of being invisible even when we were all in the same room. I can still picture so many family dinners where I sat quietly at the table, feeling like a shadow while my siblings talked loudly over each other, sharing stories, jokes, and plans, none of which ever involved me. It was like I was a ghost in my own family. Sometimes, they'd casually make weekend plans right in front of me, expecting I wouldn't ask to join because deep down, I knew I wouldn't be invited anyway. The holidays were the absolute worst. Christmases, birthdays, Thanksgiving. All the moments when families are supposed to come together felt like brutal reminders that I was alone. I'd later see photos and videos of them hugging, smiling, and celebrating without me, moments I was painfully excluded from. That loneliness wasn't just physical. It was emotional isolation that gnawed at me every day. I kept replaying the same questions in my head. What did I do wrong? Why don't they want me there? Am I just not worth it? Over time, all that hurt and rejection started shaping how I saw myself and what family even meant. I wasn't always silent about how I felt. There were many times I tried to reach out, to be part of the group, but those attempts mostly fell flat or were met with cold shoulders. I'd text them first, asking if I could join for a movie night or dinner, only to get vague replies like, maybe next time, or, worse, no reply at all. It stung every single time, like being reminded I was unwanted. Sometimes, I'd bring up the fact that I felt left out, hoping for honesty or at least some acknowledgement. But instead, I'd get defensive answers, or they'd brush it off as if my feelings were exaggerated or silly. I remember once I showed up unannounced at my oldest sister's house on her birthday, hoping to surprise her and maybe join the celebration. I wasn't invited, but I thought maybe showing up would change that. Instead, she seemed annoyed and told me, "This isn't your party," before closing the door in my face. That moment still hurts. It felt like a final confirmation that I wasn't part of their circle. Despite all this, I kept trying, because deep down, I wanted to belong, to be loved by the people who shared my blood. But the more I reached out, the clearer it became that they didn't want me close. The shift didn't happen all at once. It was slow, almost unnoticeable at first. But then something happened that flipped the script entirely. It started when my youngest sibling went through a really tough time, battling anxiety and feeling completely lost. For once, they reached out to me, the one they'd always excluded. They needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge or dismiss their feelings. I listened. I didn't try to fix things or offer empty advice. I just showed up and stayed present. Word got around, and soon, the others began coming to me for support too, whether it was help with personal problems, advice on life decisions, or just someone to vent to after a bad day. Suddenly, I became the person they leaned on, the one they needed. I didn't expect it, and honestly, it felt strange being in that position after years of feeling invisible. But slowly, the family dynamic shifted. The siblings who once ignored me now called or texted, asking for help or company. I wasn't just the forgotten one anymore. I was becoming essential to their lives. At first, I didn't quite believe it. I kept thinking it was temporary, that once the storm passed, they'd go back to ignoring me. But it didn't stop. My brother, who used to avoid eye contact with me at family events, now called me regularly to talk about his failing marriage. My oldest sister, the same one who once closed the door in my face, asked if I could help her manage mom's medical appointments when things got too overwhelming. I found myself becoming the person who held things together, the emotional anchor no one realized they'd one day need. It wasn't just practical help either. They began opening up in ways they never had before. They shared regrets, fears, and even memories from our childhood. Some I wasn't part of, but others they suddenly remembered I was. I became their safe space, their sounding board, their calm in chaos. The weirdest part? I hadn't changed. I was still the same person they'd always overlooked. The difference was, life finally humbled them enough to see what they'd ignored for so long. It was validating, but also emotionally confusing. After years of begging for a seat at the table, now they were asking me to carve the turkey. The confrontation wasn't loud or dramatic. It came during a quiet evening when we were all sitting in my apartment, a place they never used to visit, but now felt strangely comfortable in. My middle sister, the one who always acted like I didn't exist, said it first. She looked around at everyone and then said, "I don't know how we ended up making you feel like a stranger all these years." The room got silent, and suddenly all their eyes were on me. I didn't know how to respond at first. My instinct was to brush it off, to protect myself from being vulnerable. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Because I was a stranger, you all made me feel like I wasn't worth showing up for." I kept my voice calm, but my hands were shaking. They didn't interrupt. My brother nodded slowly and said, "We messed up. I think we just assumed you'd always be there." And that was it. No dramatic breakdown, no sobbing apologies, just quiet acknowledgement. But that moment was more powerful than anything loud could have been. For the first time, they saw me not just as the person they needed, but as the person they had wronged. It didn't erase the years of pain, but it was the first crack in the wall that had always divided us. That night stayed with me for a long time. On the surface, everything seemed to shift. My siblings were more present, more thoughtful, more human. But inside, I was still wrestling with so many emotions I hadn't processed. Part of me wanted to forgive them right away. I'd waited so long for them to just see me, and now that they did, shouldn't that be enough? But another part of me, the hurt, younger version of myself, wasn't ready to just let it go. I remembered all the birthdays I spent alone, the empty chairs at my graduation, the times I cried in silence while they celebrated without me. I remembered feeling like I was less than, like something was wrong with me. That kind of wound doesn't just vanish because someone finally says, "I'm sorry." I was carrying years of pain, and now that they were finally paying attention, I had to ask myself, what do I even want from them now? There was also a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time, I wasn't begging to be included. They were the ones coming to me. That power shift was disorienting, but also healing. I realized I wasn't broken or unlovable. I had always been enough. It was them who hadn't been ready to see it. And now that they finally did, I had the choice to rebuild or to protect the peace I'd created without them. After a lot of reflection, journaling, and, honestly, therapy, I decided I didn't want to cut them out, but I also wasn't going to fall back into old patterns. I started setting boundaries. If they wanted to have me in their lives, it had to be on equal terms. No more last-minute invites, no more one-sided emotional dumping, and definitely no more pretending the past didn't happen. I told them I needed consistency, not just moments of closeness when it was convenient. To my surprise, they didn't push back. In fact, they respected it. My sister stopped assuming I'd always be available to help and started asking if I had the time and energy. My brother apologized again, this time more personally, and even opened up about his own guilt for treating me like a backup plan. It didn't solve everything overnight, but it gave me hope that real change was possible. I also gave myself permission to say no. There were moments when I still felt that sting of old wounds, and instead of burying it, I acknowledged it. I stopped forcing myself to show up just to prove I belonged. Now, I show up when I wanna, when it feels good, not because I'm scared of being left behind again. For the first time, I feel like I'm writing my own role in this family, instead of waiting for someone else to hand it to me. Looking back, the pain of exclusion shaped so much of who I am, but it also taught me things I wouldn't have learned otherwise. I used to think that if my own siblings didn't want me around, it must have meant I wasn't good enough. That somehow, I was fundamentally unworthy of love, connection, or being chosen. But I was wrong. Their inability to see my value back then had nothing to do with my worth, and everything to do with their own blind spots, their own immaturity, their own comfort in familiar dynamics that didn't leave space for me. I've learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about effort, respect, and showing up when it matters. And more than anything, I've learned that I don't need to earn love by overgiving, staying quiet, or tolerating being treated like an afterthought. I'm allowed to take up space, to speak up, to walk away from people, even family, who don't treat me with care. If anyone reading this has ever felt like the outsider in their own home, please hear me. Your worth isn't determined by who invites you or who remembers you. Sometimes, the people who ignore you today will come to need you tomorrow. And when they do, you get to decide what happens next. That power is yours now. Use it wisely and gently for yourself. One of the lowest points for me, the moment that truly cemented the feeling of being the extra, was my 22nd birthday. I hadn't planned anything big. Honestly, I was just hoping for a few texts, maybe a call, or even a dinner invite. Instead, I woke up to total silence. No messages, no missed calls, not even a lazy happy B-day in the family group chat. I thought, maybe they're planning a surprise or waiting until the evening. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt. Later that afternoon, I logged on to Instagram and saw it. Photos of my siblings out together, at a rooftop restaurant downtown, celebrating my birthday without me. My name wasn't mentioned in the captions, but the date, the context, it was clear. I stared at that photo for a long time. I couldn't breathe. It felt like my chest had collapsed. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. I just went to bed with this overwhelming numbness, thinking, if your own family doesn't think you're worth showing up for, who will? That birthday became a turning point, not because they forgot, but because I finally stopped pretending it didn't matter. That night, I promised myself that one day, I'd build a life where I mattered to me, whether they ever saw it or not. In the years that followed that birthday, I started focusing on building a life that didn't revolve around waiting for their approval or attention. I dove into my passions, writing, photography, volunteering. I poured my time and energy into friendships that felt reciprocal and warm. People who asked how I was doing and genuinely listened. People who remembered my birthday without being prompted. Slowly, I began to feel like I mattered. Not because someone else said so, but because I was choosing to show up for myself. Therapy helped too. A lot. I started untangling the internalized belief that I had to earn love through silence or self-sacrifice. My therapist once told me something that stuck. You can't force someone to value you, but you can stop handing them the pen to write your worth. I began journaling, meditating, setting boundaries, things that felt selfish at first, but eventually felt like survival. And then, in a strange twist of fate, that's when my siblings started reappearing in my life. I don't think it was coincidence. I think they sensed the shift. I was no longer orbiting around them. I had become my own center, and somehow, that made me visible again. But this time, I wasn't waiting for an invitation. I had built the home I once begged them to let me into, and now, they were the ones knocking on my door. A few months ago, something happened that would have once meant the world to me. I got invited to a full family vacation. All expenses paid. Beach resort. A whole week together. In the past, I would have cried happy tears, packed my bags in a heartbeat, and spent the whole trip hoping to finally feel like part of the family. But when I saw the message in the group chat, yes, I'm in the group chat now, I just stared at it, frozen. Not because I didn't appreciate it, but because I didn't need it anymore. I sat with the invite for a few days before replying. I was polite, said thank you, but declined. I had already booked a solo trip for that same week, a quiet cabin in the mountains. Just me, some books, and no expectations. I needed that time for myself. A few years ago, missing that vacation would have felt like missing a lifeline. Now, it felt like choosing peace. Later, one of my sisters texted, "I'm proud of the life you've created. I see how strong you are now." It hit me harder than I expected, not because I needed her validation, but because it was the first time I felt she genuinely saw me as more than a background character. Still, I didn't regret saying no. I wasn't punishing them. I was just honoring the version of me that had once been left behind. A minor stroke that, thankfully, she recovered from, but it left everyone shaken. Suddenly, the group chat was buzzing. Plans, panic, confusion. And despite having 3 other siblings, I was the one they all turned to. Can you go to the hospital first? Can she stay at your place for a few weeks? Can you help with her meds and appointments? I didn't hesitate, not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to. Despite everything, I still loved her. And strangely, I didn't feel resentful. What surprised me more was how my siblings responded. They didn't disappear or dump it all on me. They showed up, too, but they admitted they didn't know how to handle it. They looked to me for guidance, for leadership, for calm. It was surreal. These same people who once left me off the guest list were now relying on me to hold the family together. And somehow I did. Not because I wanted to prove anything, not to win them over, but because I'd grown into someone solid, someone I trusted. I think that's when it fully clicked. I wasn't the forgotten sibling anymore. I was the glue, the anchor, the one who'd done the inner work while they were busy keeping each other comfortable. When Mom was finally stable and back home, my siblings suggested a weekly family night at my place to keep everyone connected. Old me would have jumped at it. New me paused, took a breath, and drafted a group message. "I'm in, but only if we rotate houses, set an end time, and respect that I might skip if I'm drained." Hitting send felt like planting a flag on my own territory. They agreed without argument, and the first gathering happened at my brother's apartment, not mine. We ordered takeout, traded hospital stories, and, surprisingly, laughed a lot. Somewhere between the dumplings and dessert, my oldest sister raised her glass and said, "To the one who kept us afloat." I smiled, accepted the toast, but inside I whispered, I kept myself afloat first. That night, walking home alone, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. The resentment that once sat like wet cement in my chest had thinned. Not gone, scars never vanish, but lighter because I'd stopped carrying their guilt for them. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't handing back the keys to anyone who once locked you out. It's letting yourself step out of the doorway and into your own life, leaving the door open only if you choose. Today, things look different. We're still a family, but not the way we used to be, and I'm okay with that. I no longer chase invitations, and I don't measure my worth by how often they call. Some weeks we talk, some we don't. Sometimes I show up to dinner, sometimes I choose solitude. The key difference now is, it's my choice. What I've come to realize is that being excluded didn't break me, it built me. Slowly, painfully, quietly, but it gave me resilience, depth, and compassion I might never have found otherwise. I no longer need to prove anything to anyone, least of all the people who once didn't see me. If you're reading this and feel like the forgotten one in your own story, let me say this. You are not invisible. You are not unworthy. Sometimes the people closest to you aren't capable of loving you the way you deserve, but that doesn't mean you stop loving yourself. Build your own table. Sit at it alone, if you must. And one day, they might come around. It means remembering without surrendering who you are.